So firstly, a big thank you to Dr. Mark Bull for sharing some of his knowledge around some misconceptions in the swing. So these are going to be three of the kind of core misconceptions that prevent people from moving at their best and creating sort of power and energy in the swing. Make sure that you watch through to the last one, because that really connects to how we move with speed and use all our kind of athletic ability. And if you get the concept wrong, then you can be really holding yourself back.
The idea of kind of standing too straight and kind of almost just keep the back straight, the spine straight at the dress can be really problematic as far as then really allowing good rotation to happen.
So we're all told, aren't we, and we're all guilty as coaches, to hinge from the hips and keep the back really straight, pelvis back, bottom back, and flex the knees. And you're telling me that's not necessarily the best way to stand?
Yeah, the idea of kind of when you bend forward, keep the spine straight, kind of keep the head up, and that really then changes anatomically how the spine produces rotation. Example has been we stand in that very kind of elevated straight position, kind of head up position at a dress.
So historically, we'd stick a club behind somebody and we'd ask them to kind of have various touch points. You can see there's a big lumbar arch here and there's a big sort of gap here. And Mark, when you said the elevated pelvis, that's the sort of the chest out position. Head up, and you're saying, hold on, we don't actually. First of all, it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you're saying we're not going to generate our best sort of rotation and movement from there. Okay, what would be a better way to go then?
The idea really is you bend forward, just maintain the natural curves of the spine. So the idea has been as you bend to the hip joints, kind of look down with the eyes more, rather than keeping the spine straight, keeping the head up, for example. So using clubs as would be in this case, Noel. So for example, you have a 7-iron here. As you stand nice and tall, the kind of shaft just on the kind of rib cage, the club head just in front of the nose. And as you bend forward, it's almost very playfully just past the grip beneath the pelvis and between the knees, rather than the idea of kind of rib cage up, kind of head up, for example.
Okay, so the bit we're really trying to avoid there then is this sense of head up and sort of chest out.
Absolutely correct.
So if I can find a way to kind of tilt, so we're tilting from the hips, that hip hinge, but allowing the sort of natural curvature. I mean, there's obviously limits to that. I don't want to be.
And that would then be not the natural curve. That's an increase in some of the curves.
Right,
So again, it's the natural curves of the spine. We're trying to avoid them being increase in either direction.
Okay, brilliant. So we're going to be more comfortable and more able to move in an athletic manner.
Absolutely.
Second misconception around how we move is keeping the head still in the backswing.
Absolutely. Probably one of the worst things we can do on every level, from pain avoidance, force and power production, speed production, movement. The idea of keeping the head still really could be number one of all those absolute not to do movements in the golf swing.
But when we look at elite players, the head does seem to stay very still in backswing.
Yeah. And I think you look at it now, what it appears to do versus what it really does, they're very different. And we're very lucky through obviously the devices we have these days, we can actually track how the head moves in swing. So again, you look at any kind of movement, whether it be sprinting, throwing, striking, any kind of movements we have in sport and life really, that to produce rotation, produce force, the head will just move typically side to side laterally as we rotate through swing. So no one's ever said, Noel, we need to start kind of doing things like this. That's absolutely not what we're saying. Almost a reference that I use, for example, in backswing for a right-handed player, just invert this if you're a left-handed player. But as you rotate through backswings, allowing the head to rotate inside the right foot or inside the right shoe through backswing. Be very precise now. No one's saying do this in any way. That's absolutely not what we're encouraging.
So swaying is a thing. That's something else. So good rotation. Let's have a look at that, Mark.
So
good rotation would have,
as they rotate through backswing, the head would rotate inside the right shoe through backswing. So as we rotate through backswing, there will be a slight lateral movement. We're talking maybe an inch or two of that head through back, and that's vital for two areas in particular, to allow that lovely rotation to then best allow us to load joints to then produce force and speed in the downswing.
So show me somebody who's keeping their head kind of who's really sort of working hard to keep their head swing. How might the body adapt in that situation?
That's a good. What we can often then start to see now for someone who's there's an actual intention to keep the head still. We can then start seeing, for example, the pelvis may go this way and then the rib cage goes that way.
Let's have a quick look at that.
So how it can look from you
behind. So the players think, right, I've got to keep my spine, my head still. Okay, we can see the sort of drop in the shoulder, the extension of the spine. Often the pelvis sort of slides out to the right.
Correct.
Okay, brilliant. So ultimately, it's okay to allow the head to move a little bit to the right, and if you're going to rotate healthily and load the joints well, it actually has to.
Absolutely, I think it's beyond okay. It's absolutely, for me, an absolute precursor for good movement. The head must drift slightly as it rotates in backswing.
For number 3, we've come into Mark's studio, and this is the one I'm excited to talk about. This really is about moving faster and taking the shackles off, and you know, bringing our athletic ability to the swing. And one of the big things we hear commentators say is that the golfer has moved their pelvis too fast, and I know that's a bugbear of yours. How is that not accurate?
Yeah, I think it's a question which is kind of shared frequently now. As I'm moving down, so my hips are moving too quickly, my pelvis is too fast, which is simply not true. I mean,
and the story there is that the club's kind of left behind and it's out of sync, and the ball goes out right.
Absolutely,
that was always Tiger's thing, apparently, wasn't it?
Yeah, the idea that hips moving too quick. I mean, if the objective is to move fast, we cannot simply not move quick enough. Realistically, it's more the other segments aren't moving quick enough to catch up. So it can display, like for camera, for example, that my pelvis is too quick, my hands and arms are kind of left behind me. So slowing the pelvis down invariably just means you're taking away actually what kind of makes someone good. You're taking away the good stuff to accommodate the things that aren't moving quick enough.
Saying that we can rotate as fast as possible, as long as we're getting the arms pulling down, dropping down, and the rib cage turning as well.
You look at it on 2 levels. I've yet to see someone rotate too much too fast for impact. It's yet to happen. It's more that the other segments, typically speaking, Noel Bean said, the rib cage and the arms and hands, aren't moving quick enough to catch up with and align with the pelvis. So rather than slowing the hips and pelvis down, we have to learn through training, through concepts, through movement, for example, to speed up the rib cage and the arms, not slow the pelvis down.
Fantastic. I mean, that already to me sounds like good fun. Rather than trying to sort of slow things down and control things, can I get other things moving more explosively? Show us a really great drill for that, please, Mark.
So just using a very small kind of medicine ball, being at best kind of 2 kilos or 5 pounds, really maximum weight, doesn't need to be a big heavy ball, just kind of holding the ball, just kind of on the diaphragm rib cage here. And as you rotate backwards, as you start to rotate down, very explosively, throw the ball downwards. So there's kind of 2 caveats to this. That where you throw the ball, where the ball lands is vital. It must land just inside the left-handed player, obviously invert this, it must just land just inside the left big toe. So as I throw it downwards very slowly initially, as the ball lands, it lands inside that kind of left big toe. And secondly, how quickly you kind of break and pause the hands and arms. So when you kind of release the ball, it's avoiding the arms continuing to move onwards. So when you actually let go.
So it seems like there's some heavy deceleration.
Massively.
There as well.
I mean, to actually train acceleration, we first have to train deceleration. The brain will only go as fast as it knows it can safely slow down.
Right, okay.
So
now,
to actually
now
get
we're getting into it. Okay.
So what's very important, going back to the drill again, as we throw the ball downwards, we learn to break immediately. So how this can look in real time now with the ball again just on the rib cage, as we rotate back very quickly and very explosive, explode the ball downwards inside the left big toe, breaking immediately is a wonderful way of encouraging that rotation, so the hands and arms, the rotation rib cage, but to match and align with the pelvis.
And of course, while staying in posture while you're making that movement.
Absolutely right.
Something has just come to mind then. How does that feed into the idea of X factor stretch and stretching the difference between the pelvis and leaving the rib cage behind? What are your thoughts around that?
That's normally a very intuitive response. So again, when you have people play with this, almost intuitively to actually start to move downwards, they'll actually use their pelvis. So it's almost a caveat again, going back to the start of this. Absolutely in no way do we need to slow the pelvis down and reduce those movements. We need to speed up the ones which are kind of slower to then align with and actually make the pelvis more usable. So actually increasing the speed of the thorax and the arms is actually then allowing us to use what the pelvis does.
But you wouldn't want to be delaying the chest and leaving it behind though to create more of a difference. That you're saying that's you can split that. Right. You can split that too much.
Yeah. So looking at almost some physiology now, how much you separate even the idea of pelvis and rib cage is problematic. There's more lumbar spine pelvis rib cage separation. Right. Because separation, the reason why I put the ball on the diaphragm here, the diaphragm is the actual point of separation through the spine. It's how we separate above and below the diaphragm, not pelvis thorax as it can be often encouraged. That actually can be for some quite a problematic movement. So when we look at more the physiology, how much you separate, it's of value but not of tremendous value. Right, the important bit is the speed of separation.
Okay, so hold on. So let's peel this back. So what we're saying then is it's not about can I get maximum separation in the way that I can feel that in my lumbar spine, by the way. We'll talk about this later. It's not you get massive separation. It's more the speed and I guess how they catch up. Is that
absolutely right? So you can look at it. I mean, this is kind of loosely speaking that kind of day one approach, but it's very valuable. There's almost 3 components to the idea of you say that stretch. How much those kind of tissues lengthen, how quickly they lengthen, and then finally how quickly they rebound, they close. The important parts are the second and third one, the speed of that separation, and then the closure, the rebound, the recoil, how long it takes for the rib cage to then catch up the pelvis.
And we can't train that, can we? By thinking about it, we train it by explosive motions and connecting to something far more intuitive.
Yes, absolutely right.
Like a drill.
The ball, I mean, this ball actually does many more things than just what we're encouraging to draw, but absolutely right, just kind of doing that drill. Again, I'm almost using that pelvis very quickly, very intuitively initially to actually start that movement of the throw of the arms downwards. So this drill really kind of coordinates and connects up all those areas: pelvis acceleration, pelvis lumbar spine, thorax separation, and then the speed of the arms and the rib cage, they catch up, the rebound, the closure rates, the recoil, are very much all connected back to this one drill.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, and has answered a lot of questions for me, and I'm sure the audience. So, if I may, you know, from a sort of high handicap beginner perspective, you know, we are, as you're probably aware, you know, we need to be moving the hips first. But when you connect to a drill like this, and you just think rotation, typically as a coach, we would see that happening. We would very rarely see in a task like this somebody just using their upper half.
Absolutely right.
And from an advanced player, the issue is often rotating the lower half too fast, or better to put it better, not actually using the upper half and the arms in sync. Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Mark.
Pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this video, then please click subscribe and I'll keep you up to date with more coaching information. And if you really want to take your game to the next level, then please visit my website, golfcoach.online, where you'll see there my subscription channel, which is Golf Coach Access, which is all about building a golf coaching and education community and having really structured long-term programs. And the best thing is you can get immediate free access.